My daughter didn't visit me once during my wife's chemotherapy. But on the day of her funeral, she posted a video laughing on a rooftop bar in Nashville with the caption, "Living for moments like these." That was the same afternoon I found a sealed envelope in my wife's handwriting sitting on the kitchen counter, an envelope that hadn't been there when I left for the church that morning. "I'm Frank, and I was married to Carol for 38 years. She passed away in late September after a 2-year fight with ovarian cancer. The kind of cancer that gives you hope in the beginning, takes it away slowly, and then takes everything else. Carol fought hard. She did the chemo, the surgeries, the experimental treatments that left her too weak to get out of bed some mornings. Through all of it, she never stopped being Carol organized, sharp, always thinking 3 steps ahead of everyone else in the room. Our daughter Lauren is 32. She lives about 4 hours away in Nashville with her husband Tyler. They got married 3 years ago in a ceremony that cost more than Carol and I spent on our first house. We helped pay for it, of course. That's what parents do. Lauren had a good job at a marketing agency when she got married, and Tyler worked in commercial real estate. They looked like they were building something real. Or so I thought. When Carol was first diagnosed, Lauren came home for one weekend. She cried, hugged her mother, told her she'd be there for everything. Then she drove back to Nashville and the calls started getting shorter. Tyler was busy. There was a work thing. The drive was long. Every excuse had just enough logic in it that I kept giving her the benefit of the doubt, the way fathers do when they don't want to believe what they're already starting to feel in their chest. Carol never complained about Lauren's absence out loud. Not to me. She'd just go quiet sometimes when I asked if she'd heard from her, and then she'd change the subject, ask me about the garden or what I wanted for dinner. That quietness said more than any words could have. A woman who had raised a daughter for 32 years, who had been at every school play and every heartbreak and every milestone, sitting alone in a cancer treatment center, asking the nurse if anyone had called. The funeral was held at St. Mean Andrews, the church Carol and I had attended since we moved to Greendale, Ohio, back in 1997. Half the town showed up. Carol had taught 2nd grade at Brookfield Elementary for 24 years. Her students, now grown adults, came back. Former colleagues filled 2 full rows. Our neighbor, Dorothy Haynes, who is 78 years old and uses a walker, got her grandson to drive her 40 minutes just to be there. Lauren's seat was empty. I kept looking at it throughout the service. The flowers Carol had actually chosen herself weeks before she died sat at the front of the altar. The pastor read the verse Carol had underlined in her Bible years ago. Everything was exactly as Carol had wanted, down to the song they played when people filed in. She had planned her own funeral with the same quiet precision she brought to everything in her life. The only thing she hadn't been able to plan was whether her daughter would show up. After the burial, I was standing near the cemetery gates saying goodbye to people when my phone buzzed. I assumed it was another condolence text from someone who couldn't make it. I glanced down at the screen. The notification was from Instagram. Lauren had posted a new photo. My fingers went cold as I opened it. There she was, standing on a rooftop somewhere with a skyline behind her, a cocktail in her hand, laughing with her head thrown back. Tyler was beside her, his arm around her shoulders, both of them golden and relaxed. The caption said, "Living for moments like these. Life is short, so make it count." The timestamp was 12 minutes ago. While the pastor was saying the final blessing over Carol's grave, Lauren was posting vacation content. My brother-in-law, Dennis, Carol's younger brother, was standing next to me. He saw my face and reached for my arm. "Frank, what is it?" I handed him the phone without speaking. I watched his expression go from concern to disbelief to something darker. He handed it back to me without a word because there were no words. That was when my phone buzzed again. The message came through as a text. The contact name displayed on the screen was Carol. It read, "Frank, go home right now. Go alone. I love you." I stood at those cemetery gates holding a phone that had just received a text message from my wife who had been in the ground for 20 minutes, and I understood in that moment that Carol had known. She had known something I hadn't let myself know, and she had been preparing for it without telling me, because that was exactly who Carol was. Dennis saw my face go white. "What's wrong? You look like you're going to fall over." "I need to go home," I said. "I'll drive you." "Alone," I said. "I need to go alone." He studied me for a long moment, the way people who have known you for decades can read something in your face that you haven't said out loud. He nodded slowly and stepped back. "I don't remember much of the drive home. I know I went the speed limit. I know I stopped at the red light on Millbrook Avenue even though there were no other cars. I pulled into the driveway of the house Carol and I had lived in for 26 years and sat with the engine running for a few minutes, just looking at the front windows. I went inside. The kitchen counter was bare when I had left that morning. I was certain of it. I had stood at that counter drinking coffee and staring at nothing for 20 minutes before I made myself put on my suit jacket and go to the church. There had been nothing there. Now there was an envelope, standard-sized, cream-colored, the kind Carol used for important correspondence. My name was written on the front in her handwriting, not a scrawl. Careful and deliberate, the same way she wrote everything. I sat down at the kitchen table and held it for a long time before I opened it. Inside were 3 items, a small silver key with a paper tag that read, "Safe Deposit Box 3 First Midwest Bank," a handwritten letter, and a folded piece of paper with a name, a phone number, and an address. My hands were steady as I unfolded the letter. I don't know why. Everything else in me was shaking. "My dearest Frank," it began. "If you found this, then my worst fear came true today. Lauren didn't come. I've been praying I was wrong. I've been lying awake at night hoping I'd misjudged her, but if she wasn't there today, if you had to bury me without your daughter beside you, then you need to know what I've learned over the past several months, because I couldn't bear to leave you without the truth." I had to put the letter down. I stood up, walked to the kitchen sink, and looked out the window at the backyard where Carol's vegetable garden was still half standing. The late-season tomatoes still on the vine because I hadn't been able to bring myself to take them down. Then I sat back down and kept reading. "About 8 months ago, when you were taking your Tuesday evening walks and I was too tired for my last treatment to come with you, I started going through our bank statements the way I used to before I got sick. You remember how I always handled the accounts. I noticed some things I couldn't explain. Small transfers, unusual charges. I started keeping notes. I did remember. Carol had always managed our finances. When she got too sick to do it, I'd taken over the basics, paying the electric bill, making sure the mortgage cleared. But the savings accounts, the investment accounts, the retirement fund, I'd let those sit because Carol had always handled them, and I trusted everything was fine. It was not fine. The letter continued. Over the past 2 years, Lauren has taken approximately $53,000 from us, Frank. I know that number seems impossible, so I want you to understand that I verified every single transaction before I wrote this letter. She had access to the home equity line of credit we gave her access to 5 years ago for emergencies. She used it like a personal account. She also used the credit card we added her to as a backup when she first moved to Nashville. You stopped checking that card because we never carried a balance on it. She knew that. $53,000. I sat with that number for a long time. $53,000 was the amount we had set aside to cover the out-of-pocket costs of Carol's treatment, the cost the insurance didn't touch, the specialized oncologist who wasn't in-network, the anti-nausea medications that weren't on the approved formulary, the home nursing visits when Carol was recovering from her second surgery. We had dipped into savings for some of those. I had always assumed it was just the medical bills. It wasn't just the medical bills. I hired someone to help me understand the full picture. Carol's letter went on. Her name is Patricia Moss. She's a private investigator based in Columbus. The phone number and address on the separate paper are hers. She has been documenting Lauren and Tyler's financial situation for 4 months. What she found is not just a spending problem, Frank. Lauren was fired from her job at the agency 14 months ago. She never told us. She and Tyler have been living almost entirely on borrowed money. Their credit cards, a personal loan from Tyler's parents, and our accounts. They owe roughly $78,000 across various debts. They have been planning to use our estate to pay it off. I know this because Patricia obtained a recording. I unfolded the separate piece of paper. Patricia Moss. A Columbus number. I set it on the table next to the letter and kept reading. 3 months ago, I was resting upstairs on a Tuesday afternoon when Lauren called Tyler from our backyard. She didn't know I had the bedroom window open. I heard her say, "And Frank, I need you to know that I wrote this down the same day so I wouldn't misremember it." She said, "Mom's not going to last much longer. The doctor basically told Dad it's a matter of weeks. Once she's gone, he'll be too wrecked to look at anything closely. We just have to hold on a little longer, and then we can use the estate to clear everything and start over properly." Tyler said something I couldn't hear. And Lauren said, I know, but it won't be much longer now." I lowered the letter to the table. Outside the kitchen window, a late October wind moved through the tomato vines. I had taught Lauren to plant those vines. She was 7 the first time she helped Carol push the seedlings into the soil. She used to come running inside with the first tomato of the season like she'd found buried treasure. That memory, and the woman on the phone in my backyard, counting down the weeks until her mother died, felt like 2 different people. And maybe they were. I picked up the letter again. I changed our will, Frank. I worked with Gary Hoffman on it, quietly over the past 3 months, and he's been instructed to speak with you as soon as you are ready. I moved the bulk of our savings into an account under your name only. The retirement accounts have been restructured. Our estate is protected. I also left instructions with Patricia about how to proceed if you decide to take legal action, and I left you the choice because it is your choice to make, not mine. I trust you completely. I have always trusted you completely. I love you more than I have ever known how to say. Please go to the bank tomorrow. Please call Patricia. And please know that I am so sorry you had to do this day without me beside you. You deserved better. You have always deserved better. I sat in Carol's chair at the kitchen table, her chair, the one closest to the window where she liked the afternoon light, and I cried for a very long time. I called Patricia Moss the next morning. She had a calm, direct manner on the phone that I immediately appreciated. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop in Columbus that Thursday. I spent the 2 days in between going to the bank, opening the safe deposit box, and sitting alone in a house full of Carol's things. The safe deposit box held exactly what Carol had promised, bank statements going back 2 years with each unauthorized transaction highlighted in yellow. Credit card records, screenshots of Lauren's social media posts from dates that corresponded with expensive purchases made on our accounts, a weekend in Savannah. The same week, a $1,400 charge hit our credit card. A shopping trip to a high-end boutique in Nashville the same day a $900 transfer went out of our home equity line. Carol had matched every single one. She had done all of this while undergoing chemotherapy. She had sat in those treatment chairs with a yellow highlighter and a stack of bank statements, building a case against her own daughter, because she loved me enough to make sure I wouldn't be left defenseless. Patricia Moss was a heavy-set woman in her late 50s, with reading glasses pushed up on her forehead and a folder she set on the table between us before she even sat down properly. "Your wife was one of the most methodical clients I've ever had," she said. "I want you to know that before we start." She knew exactly what she was asking me to do and exactly why. The folder contained 4 months of documentation. Lauren and Tyler's debt situation was worse than Carol's letter had described. In addition to the $78,000 they already owed, they had taken out a second personal loan 2 months prior. They were behind on their apartment rent. Tyler's parents had stopped lending them money after they failed to pay back an earlier loan. Patricia had also obtained, through legal channels, a series of text messages between Lauren and Tyler in which they discussed their financial plan. The plan, laid out in Tyler's texts with the casual confidence of someone who had never been wrong about anything, was straightforward. Wait for Carol to die. Allow Frank to grieve for a few months without pressure, then begin gently suggesting that Lauren help manage the estate, gain access to the accounts, and systematically use the inheritance to eliminate their debts. One of Tyler's texts read, "Once your dad hands over the finances like he did before, we can move things around before he even knows what the balances are. He trusted your mom with all of it, and she's going to be gone. He'll need you." I read that line twice. Then I closed the folder. "Your wife signed a formal complaint with the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office," Patricia told me. "Grand theft, exploitation of a vulnerable adult. It's been sitting in review pending your decision to proceed or not. Given the documented amounts and the circumstances, Carol's illness, her age, the systematic nature of the theft, the prosecutor's office has indicated they'd pursue it seriously." "What does that mean for Lauren?" I asked. "Felony charges. Possible jail time." The amounts involved, combined with the fact that the victim was terminally ill, carry significant weight in Ohio. I drove home from Columbus thinking about Lauren at 7 years old with a tomato in her hands. Lauren showed up 11 days after the funeral. I hadn't reached out, and neither had she. Then, one afternoon, I heard a car in the driveway and looked out to see her rental pulling in. She and Tyler both got out. They looked tired. Lauren was wearing sunglasses even though it was overcast. Tyler was carrying a leather portfolio like he'd come to a business meeting. I met them at the door. "Dad." Lauren reached for a hug, and I stepped back slightly, enough that she understood. Her face did something complicated. "I know we need to talk about everything. I'm so sorry we couldn't be there." "The flights were, come inside," I said. We sat in the living room. Carol's reading glasses were still on the side table next to her chair. I hadn't moved them. Lauren glanced at them and then looked away quickly. Tyler opened the portfolio on his knee. "Frank, we know this is a hard time, and we don't want to make it harder. We just thought it would be helpful to start thinking practically about the estate so nothing gets complicated down the road. We want to help you manage things," Lauren said. Her voice had a careful warmth to it. The warmth of someone who has rehearsed. "You've been through so much, and we don't want you to be overwhelmed with financial stuff on top of everything else." I looked at my daughter for a long moment. She was wearing pearl earrings that Carol had given her for her 25th birthday. "Your mother kept very careful records," I said. Something shifted in Lauren's posture. "Just slightly." "What do you mean?" I walked to the desk and picked up the folder I'd prepared. Copies of the bank statements Carol had highlighted, the credit card records, the transactions matched to Lauren's social media posts. I set it on the coffee table in front of them. Lauren looked at it without touching it. Tyler's hand on the portfolio tightened. "October 14th, 2 years ago," I said. $1,400 charged to our visa. Same day you posted photos from a hotel in Savannah. Dad, March 3rd of last year. $900 from our home equity line. Same day Tyler texted you about the boutique on Fifth Avenue. How do you have his texts? Tyler said. His voice had lost its measured tone. Your mother hired a private investigator 8 months ago. She documented everything. The room went quiet in a way that felt physical. Lauren took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red, not from crying, at least not yet, from something closer to fear. Dad, I can explain all of this. We were in a bad spot financially, and I made some terrible decisions, and I know how wrong it was. But we were drowning. We needed help, and I didn't know how to ask. You knew how to take it without asking. She flinched. It wasn't like that. I heard the conversation you had with Tyler from our backyard 3 months ago, I said. When you thought I was asleep upstairs, your mother heard it too. She had the window open. The color left Lauren's face. She told me what you said, that it wouldn't be much longer, that you just had to hold on until she was gone. That's not what I meant. Lauren's voice broke. I was scared, and I said something awful, and I've regretted it every single day. You didn't come to her funeral. Silence. You were 4 hours away by car, and you didn't come to your mother's funeral. Our flights, you drove to Nashville, Lauren. There were no flights involved. We've made that drive together a dozen times. It's 4 hours. I looked at her steadily. You posted a photo on Instagram that afternoon. Tyler started to say something. I turned to look at him, and he closed his mouth. Here's what's going to happen, I said. I walked back to the desk and picked up the second folder, the one Gary Hoffman had prepared. Your mother changed our will 3 months ago. You're not inheriting anything. Our estate will be donated entirely to the Carolyn Reeves Memorial Fund for Pediatric Cancer Research, which your mother established through her oncologist's office before she passed. Lauren's hand went to her mouth. Additionally, the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office has a complaint on file signed by your mother 6 weeks before she died, documenting $53,000 in unauthorized withdrawals and charges over a 2-year period. I have not yet confirmed whether to proceed. Tyler stood up. This is insane. You can't do this. Carol was sick. Her memory was perfect, I said. She was more organized in her last 3 months than most people are in their entire lives. Sit down. He sat down. I gave them a moment, then I continued. I have a proposal. You sign a full written confession, every amount, every date, every transaction notarized and witnessed. In exchange, I'll give you $40,000 to pay your most pressing debts, and I will not forward the prosecutor's complaint. You'll also sign a document agreeing to no further contact with me. No calls, no visits, no letters. You take the money and you go build whatever life you can somewhere else. $40,000, Tyler said. After everything, Tyler. Lauren's voice was flat. She was looking at me, not at him. If you don't sign, I said, I file with the prosecutor tomorrow morning. Grand theft of an elderly and terminally ill person carries up to 5 years in Ohio. Patricia Moss's documentation is thorough, and the texts between you and Tyler are included in the complaint. Lauren looked at the folder on the coffee table. She looked at the pearl earrings she probably hadn't even thought about when she got dressed that morning. She looked at her mother's reading glasses on the sign table. There's one more condition, I said. Before you sign anything, I want you to listen to something. I took out my phone and played the audio file Patricia had sent me. Lauren's own voice filled the living room, tinny through the phone speaker but completely recognizable. Carol had heard this from an upstairs window while she was too sick to stand for long. She had written it down that same afternoon. Now it played back in the house where Lauren had grown up. In the room where Carol had read her bedtime stories and helped her with science projects and sat up late when she had her heart broken for the first time. Lauren began crying before the recording ended. Tyler stared at the floor. When it finished, the room was completely silent. "I didn't mean it like that," Lauren whispered. "I believe that you believe that," I said, "but your mother heard it while she was dying, and she wrote it down that same day because she never let herself pretend about things. She knew exactly who you had become. She spent her last months making sure that I would be protected from the consequences of that. So whatever you meant or didn't mean, she heard it. And now you can live with that." They signed the following afternoon. A notary Gary Hoffman arranged came to the house. Lauren's hand shook the whole time. Tyler signed without looking up. I wrote them a check for $40,000, drawn from the account Carol had set up. Carol's money, given to them one final time as exactly what it was. A buyout, not a gift. They left without saying goodbye. Lauren paused at the front door and looked back at me, and I could see she wanted to say something. I waited. She couldn't find it. She walked out. I stood at the window and watched their rental car back out of the driveway of the house where she had learned to ride a bike. The house where Carol had held her when her grandfather died. The house where we had decorated a Christmas tree every year for 30 years. The car turned out of the neighborhood and was gone. I went and sat in Carol's chair. For the next several months, I heard nothing from them. I allowed myself to imagine, cautiously, that they had used the money sensibly. Paid the debts, found legitimate work, begun something honest. The imagination of a father is stubborn in ways that have nothing to do with evidence. It was Dennis who told me on a Sunday call in late January that he'd run into someone who worked at a casino in Cincinnati. Lauren and Tyler had been there 3 weekends in a row. High-limit tables. Tyler apparently had a system. Patricia confirmed it a week later. They had burned through most of the $40,000 in 2 months. The debts they'd owed had grown, not shrunk, because they'd taken on new ones. Lauren and Tyler were back in crisis, this time with fewer options. Her family had turned away from them. His family had stopped taking calls. They'd moved 3 times in 2 months. In late February, the local Greendale Gazette ran a story. I found it online before anyone could warn me about it. The headline read, "Local man leaves grieving daughter out of wife's will. Keeps estate for himself." Lauren had gone to the paper. The story presented her as a daughter cut out of her mother's will by a controlling father who had isolated Carol in her final months. There was a photo of Lauren looking tired and sad. She had given the reporter a version of events that was internally coherent if you didn't know anything else. I called Gary Hoffman and then Patricia Moss, and then I sat on the porch and waited. It took about 10 days. The Gazette received more than 60 letters. Carol's colleagues from the school came forward. Her oncologist's office released a statement, carefully worded, affirming that Carol had been of entirely sound mind and fully autonomous in her decisions throughout her treatment. Dorothy Haynes, who is 78 years old and uses a walker, dictated a letter to her grandson that ran in the paper's letters section. Former neighbors, parents of Carol's students, people from our church. They had all known Carol. They had known her for decades. They knew who she was, and they knew who I was, and they said so plainly. Lauren's story collapsed under the weight of everyone who had actually been there. I never saw Lauren again after the day she left with the check. 6 months after the newspaper's story, I received formal notification that Lauren had filed for divorce from Tyler, citing financial abandonment. Tyler had apparently found someone else willing to fund his next venture. Lauren had relocated to Atlanta and, from what Dennis heard through mutual acquaintances, had found a job and an apartment and was attempting some version of starting over. I hoped it was true. I hoped she would build something real. I hoped she thought about her mother sometimes, about the real Carol, not the Carol she'd been counting down the days to outlast, but the one who had stayed up all night sewing her Halloween costumes and sat in the hospital for 12 hours. The time she broke her wrist at camp, the Carolyn Reeves Memorial Fund held its first fundraising dinner in March at the hotel downtown, the same hotel Carol and I had gone to for our anniversary every year for 2 decades. Gary Hoffman was there. Patricia Moss came with her husband. Dennis gave a speech that made everyone cry, the good kind of crying. We raised $44,000 in one evening. I sat at the table with Carol's photo and the program in front of me, and I thought about the envelope on the kitchen counter, the text message from her phone, the yellow highlighter and the bank statements. 42 years of marriage, and she was still, even from the other side of it, the most practical and most loving person I had ever known. On the first anniversary of Carol's death, I went out to the backyard and finally brought in the last of the tomato vines. They were long past saving, brittle and brown, but I hadn't been ready until now. I pulled them out carefully and set them in the compost. Then I sat on the back porch with a glass of the Napa Valley Cabernet we'd been saving for our 40th anniversary, and I talked to her out loud for a while, the way you do when you've been married long enough that the line between talking and thinking stops mattering. I told her about the fund, about Dennis's speech, about the research fellowship her oncologist's office had named in her honor at the university hospital. I told her the tomato vines were finally down and I'd plant new ones in the spring. I told her I was going to be okay, not the kind of okay you say to make people stop worrying about you, but the real kind, the kind she had worked so hard to make possible. She had known, right up to the end, that the people who stay and the people who leave reveal themselves by exactly that, staying or leaving. She had made sure that the ones who stayed were protected. She had made sure that what we'd built together would outlast the people who had tried to take it apart. That was Carol. That was always Carol. Even when she was gone, she was still the most present person in my life. I finished the wine and watched the light go out of the October sky over the garden she had planted, the soil still turned and ready, waiting for whatever I decided to put into it next. I went inside, washed the glass, turned off the kitchen light, and for the first time since September, I slept through the night. I've thought a lot about the moment I found that envelope on the kitchen counter. Carol had been gone less than an hour, and she was already protecting me. That's the detail that stays with me more than any other. Not the bank statements, not the recordings, not the signed confession. The fact that my wife, in the final weeks of her life, spent her energy making sure I would not be left alone and undefended. That kind of love doesn't ask for anything in return. It just acts. What happened to Lauren was not something that came out of nowhere. It built slowly, one small compromise at a time, one rationalization layered on top of another. The first time she used our credit card without asking, she probably told herself it was temporary. The first time she transferred money from the home equity line, she probably planned to replace it, and somewhere along the way the plan to replace it quietly became a plan to inherit it. That's how people end up somewhere they would have said years earlier was impossible for them to go, not in one dramatic leap, but in 100 small steps that each felt manageable in the moment. I don't say that to excuse what she did. There is no excuse for counting down the days until your mother dies. There is no excuse for posting vacation photos during her funeral. Those choices belong entirely to Lauren, and she will carry them for the rest of her life, regardless of what she builds going forward. What I'm saying is that the cause always precedes the consequence by a long distance. By the time Lauren was standing in my living room watching her face go white at the sound of her own recorded voice, the outcome had already been determined years before. Carol understood this. She was the most morally intelligent person I have ever known, and she understood that you cannot rescue someone from the consequences of who they have chosen to be. You can offer them a way out. You can give them one last chance to take accountability and start over honestly, but you cannot want their redemption more than they want it themselves. What Carol gave me was not just financial protection. She gave me clarity. The kind that lets you look at someone you love or once loved and see them accurately without the distortion of hope you haven't earned. I think the hardest thing I ever did was not throwing Lauren out of the house. It was not filing the complaint with the prosecutor. It was accepting finally that the daughter I raised and the person who stood in my living room were not the same, and that no amount of my grief or my forgiveness was going to change that, unless she changed it herself. That is the thing about integrity. Yours or anyone else's, it is built daily, in private, in the choices no one else sees. Carol built hers over 38 years of showing up, of being honest, of doing the harder right thing instead of the easier wrong one. I watched her do it. I tried to do the same beside her. And in the end, that foundation held. Even after she was gone, it held. That is the only legacy that actually lasts. Not money, not property, not anything that can be transferred or inherited or taken away. Just the shape of who you were when it mattered, and the people whose lives are better because you were exactly that.